Welcome to the Power of Peacefulness podcast. Today we're going to be speaking to Dr. Jillian Rigert. I can't wait to share her story with you. We are going to be speaking about the peace within. We all need peace in our lives, and because of that, I created a free workbook. You can go ahead and download that at SharonMcLaugjlinMD.com/workbook. It's free. Go through it at your leisure, grab some tea, some coffee, and just start writing. If you like this podcast, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up. As I mentioned earlier, we have Jillian Rigert with us. Jillian, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Sharon. I am so delighted to be here. So I'm mainly a certified Martha Beck Wayfinder life coach and leadership coach, helping high achievers who have abandoned themselves for such a long time being who they thought they needed to be, reclaim that narrative in their own brain and create a life that's true to themselves.
Jillian, I know you're a practicing physician. How did you get into this? Tell us your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, I started my journey fast tracking to become an Air Force oral maxillofacial surgeon, thinking that I will be happy and worthy when I achieve this status of what I thought exemplified worthiness. And what that meant to me was doing the hardest thing I possibly could and being untouchable, meaning when I saw these Air Force oral surgeons, I'm like, they are badass, if I'm allowed to say that. I hope I am. But they, and I wanted to be a badass, and I also wanted to protect my sensitive soul. So year after year of abandoning myself, how it showed up for me was when I was in oral surgery training, I just felt ill. I actually developed a life-threatening eating disorder, and that was my way of coping, just like someone would cope with anything that's a numbing agent that helps them to get through medical training or tough times. And I realized that being a surgeon wasn't going to be a sustainable path for me, but how do I dare quit? Because we're taught quitting is the ultimate failure. So I had quite an existential crisis. And paired with the sleep deprivation, the stresses, I became quite suicidal. And ultimately, I found Martha Beck along my healing journey. Her book, The Way of Integrity, which is all about how mental, spiritual, and physical illness shows up when you're not living in alignment with your true nature. And it really resonated with me. And I left surgery and I was medically discharged from the Air Force in 2017. And over these past almost 7 years now, it's been a stepwise adventure into my healing. It hasn't been comfortable, but it's been worth it. And now I appreciate and value the opportunity to help others going through similar journeys.
Can we go back to when you were in training?
Yes.
And you were having these experiences, feelings? For all of you that don't know, we had done, it's on the other side, Thriving After Burnout. It's a book of over 50 women physicians who speak about their burnout, and Jillian's story is in that book. We self-soothe, whether it's drinking, not eating too much, like emotional eating, I would say. So many ways that we actually damage ourselves because, do you think this goes back to not living the life of your true self? Why do you think that some people get into this?
Yeah, I find that that's a contributing factor, multifactorial. I think a core wound of unworthiness was part of my journey. I didn't feel worthy of nourishment. I had all this self-criticism. It was nauseating in my own mind. It just felt, we talk about imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon, and I had this chronic sense of not enoughness, non-belonging. And it was such deep mental pain that the eating disorder numbed me. And as you said, for some people, eating provides that soothing. And for me, whatever biology is in my brain, not eating and running a lot was soothing for me and very destructive to the point of nearly costing me my life.
You talk about self-criticism. There are many women out there that are listening that have concerns with self-criticism or issues with self-criticism. I hate to say issue because it's just how we feel internally. It's our belief that we have. Talk to me about, or them about self-criticism and some of the things that you think have helped you come to realize that you are so worthy. We are, all of us are worthy.
Yeah, I find that we've normalized self-criticism, right? We just push it up. Oh, we're all our own worst critic. And I just say, well, why? Why does that need to be true? Why do we just accept that to be true? And a lot of people find self-compassion to be fluffy and if I develop self-compassion, I'm going to stop being this hard worker. I'm going to be weaker. I'm going to be vulnerable to other people's agendas, right? And that's actually not what happens when you lean into it. But I believe that to be true too. And what I learned from Brene Brown, which ultimately allowed me to really harness this self-compassion, and I actually leveraged a lot of the work of Kristen Neff in developing self-compassion. I highly recommend her resources and books. But Brene Brown said in her research, she found that the people who had the highest levels of mental toughness, what she found at their core were high levels of self-compassion. And she was talking to military members, these high achievers. So permission to change that narrative in your brain. I've learned, I thought we had to beat ourselves down to build ourselves up stronger. I didn't develop thicker skin like that. That just perpetuated that sense of not enoughness, unworthiness, to the point where, I thought, I almost took my own life. I thought I have no value to offer the world. And other people are in that psychological pain. And to be able to give yourself self-compassion while you're in your dark state might feel like a huge leap, but just pausing to even just stop the self-critical thoughts. Like the next best step might just be stop talking to yourself negatively. And I was just reading a mindfulness worksheet that was recommending that we pause, we take a moment with those thoughts that we're having. We take a step out of ourselves and, of course, be our own best friend. Talk to ourselves as if it was someone who loves you, and then realize you have that power within yourself to be your own best friend.
Jillian, thank you for being so transparent. It's not very often that people will share their stories about suicidal thoughts. So thank you. I want to call that out. When we talk about self-criticism, I feel like there's two factors going in, like how we feel, we beat ourselves up, but also external. When you were talking, this resonated with me. I think about my years of surgery training, and it was rough. It was really rough. And I know that we have spoken, you thought, unless I'm wrong, I remember you mentioning people that really supported you during that time when you were having a difficult time. I felt like my time was very, there was so much toughness on the outside. So as you're standing, you could picture you have so much negative coming at you, but then inside you feel negative too. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we can necessarily change the negative coming in. We could change how we respond to it, we often say, but also how we respond to it probably does play a factor in how much external is going to come in. Because I truly believe that when you let people know that it bothers you, some people, unfortunately, they get off on that. They love that. They love the power. Where if you show them that you're just going to brush it off, it's not fazing you, some of those personalities or people, they go on to somebody else. Like, well, let's find somebody else who's weak that I could get over on, or, find some sort of, how do I say this? Some sort of like a high from damaging somebody else.
And that's their own insecurity, right? And you're so right. Over these past few years, that's what I've noticed. And what I know, I worked for free for almost half a year in 2021, and I was in a really dire state with my eating disorder at that time. I just thought I had no value. And then for the next year, I beat myself up. Like, how the heck did you allow yourself to work for free? It was one of the worst times. And we're talking, only 3 years ago. So I'm currently doing like the best I feel I've ever been from the worst I've ever been. But the issue with risking that is sometimes those rock bottoms are costing people their life. So I don't recommend hitting a rock bottom, but I want to say that for people who are in that darkness, like once you have the awareness and get the tools and the resources and the community who cares about you, like it can just be very, and not so long, like the length that it took you to get to that dark hole may not be the length that takes you to get out of it once you have the awareness, the resources, the tool, the insight. And just like what you said, it was when I developed self-compassion, it was like putting these glasses on where I could see how I was accepting maltreatment from others. And I started setting boundaries and unlearning what I thought I knew and then relearning. And there's a quote from Danielle Laporte that says, "The world reflects back at you how much you value yourself." And I was like, oh God, that's nauseating for me to think about. I didn't value myself, and therefore I was filtering out the positive feedback and just honing in on all this other criticism from the external voices.
I love that quote, and thank you for sharing it. You talked about some tools. Could we talk about some tips for the women, anybody listening out there, that can help them with this?
first pause. We are in this highly busy society. Like if you have a calendar and you got all the check boxes, put white space on there. And it might need to be short, sitting with yourself if you have a high self-critic, or most of us have a lot of trauma stored in our bodies. Like don't flood yourself and sit for an hour at a time. Incrementally start to get more comfortable sitting with yourself, observing your thoughts, and learning to harness the transformational power of changing those thoughts from the self-critical voice to a voice of self-compassion, and observe how you feel in each different voice that you have in your head. And remember that, jot it down somewhere. So that would be my first recommendation, right? Is always pause, stop, and then question the beliefs that you have in your head. And this can be, have a trusted friend, a therapist, a coach, because it's hard to coach ourselves and observe. We've been believing these thoughts for so long. We just grip them so tightly, thinking that they're true. So have someone to help you challenge them. And a lot could come up. So I'm a huge advocate for therapy to help you process through, where did I learn that from? How has it been affecting me? A lot of the times when I'm letting go of thoughts, beliefs, career transitions, there's so much grief associated with that. And that's painful. And sometimes we want to speed through that pain, but being able to sit with it and process through it is how we can free ourselves longer term. And then I love the coaching mindset is be curious, non-judgmental. So that's really where, when you notice you're just beating yourself up, for example, I am really good with, I have a credit card just to establish more credit score. I missed a payment for the first time in my life. I've had a lot going on. A family member was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I'm in this stage of transition, trying to finish all these things. And I'm pretty compulsive about checking bank statements at least once a week and getting all. Anyways, first time, of course, where is your brain going to go? I can't believe you did that. You did something wrong. And so maybe even last year I would have spiraled down, but I caught myself as oh my gosh, I missed it. And immediately my brain went, how many times you paid that? This is the one time. And I focus on all the times that I paid that and I did well. And so that's the difference between I could have spiraled and focused on that. That 1% when you get a 99% on the test, I used to be that focusing on that. Oh, got a 99. Okay, good. And then that 1%, I can't believe I missed that. And just think about a scenario in your life where you did that, one misstep, and then you just go spiral thinking you're the worst person in the world. So find evidence where that's not true.
Great advice. Jillian, thank you for being here today. I want the listeners out there to know where to find you. I know that you have a YouTube channel, A Life True to You. Mm-hmm. Where can they find you on your website? I'll have this in the show notes too.
Yeah, my website's JillianRigertCoaching.com. I currently do one-on-one coaching. There's group coaching coming up soon. And if you like LinkedIn, you can also find me on there.
All right, Jillian, one last tip before we leave.
Find your community. I think it's so important to be who you are and find the people who resonate with that. Because having a community was hugely transformational for me in comparison to where I was in 2021, being so alone, and realizing that when you truly show up who you are, you'll find your place of belonging. And when you abandon who you are to fit in, that's when it's extremely lonely, even if you're surrounded by people. I just want people to know that they are loved, they are valuable, they are worthy, and I don't want to see their CV. It would actually make me vomit if they gave me any sort of external reason why I should think that they are more worthy than I already think that they are. And I hope that they can really believe that themselves.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate you having me. And I love this new podcast that you have.
Thank you.